All right, we're live on YouTube. Tiffany, I'm going to send it back to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And UGTV will start in about a minute and a half. All right, we are live on UGTV as well as YouTube.
Thank you. Before I call the meeting to order, I want to announce that due to COVID-19, we have individuals attending remotely as well as on site. All participants joining by phone should mute their phones when not speaking to avoid background noise. And during the meeting, please make sure that you announce yourself by name and title every time you speak, so the public that is participating knows who is speaking. This is critical given the number of remote participants and his current guidance from the Kansas Attorney General. I'd ask the clerk to announce the meeting and call the roll, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening. You are hereby notified that I have called a special session of the Unified Government of Wyandotte County, Kansas City, Kansas, to be held Thursday, May 13th, 2021 at 5 p.m. for an update on the Levees project, followed by a report on economic development initiative or incentives. Roll call. Bynum.
Here.
Burrows.
Here.
Townsend.
Here.
McKiernan.
Here.
Ramirez.
Here.
6.
Johnson.
Here.
Kane.
Here.
Markley.
Here.
Walters.
Here.
Philbrook.
Here.
Alvey.
Here. All right, so tonight we have two topics. The first is a Levees project update, followed by the Economic Development Incentives Report. So I'd ask Mr. Bach to present staff for the Levees project update.
Thank you, Mayor. Doug Bach, County Administrator. Commissioners, as you're all aware, a couple of years ago, we were awarded in the Kansas City region of about $500 million to go toward repair of the levee systems around our area to protect our communities. Our staff, in coordination with the Corps, has been doing a lot of work on this over this time period. So we thought tonight would be a good opportunity to come forward and give you an update as to where we are on this project from the construction activities, as well as get into a little bit of where we're at with some of the connecting trails that we're doing on the levee projects as well. So first, I will recognize Melissa Seaman, Assistant County Administrator, who's been leading this project from staff. Melissa?
Right. Thank you, Doug. Mayor, Commissioners, good evening. We're really excited to be here tonight. And I have two of our shining stars with me tonight. Sarah White, who has been the lead project engineer working with the Corps, along with Trenton Fogelsong, our wastewater engineer, who's been working with Sarah on the Corps project. Also tonight on the call, we do have available to us Scott Mensing with the Army Corps of Engineers, who has been our guiding light through this project, and him and Sarah go a long ways back with the Turkey Creek project as well. So I'm going to turn it over to Sarah, but I want to explain this sort of the gravity of what we're talking about tonight, which is pretty impressive. This is considered a mega project with the Army Corps of Engineers. And given that the Army Corps does a lot of things that we all probably see as very big, knowing that we are actually hosting a mega project within our community is pretty amazing. I also have two other people that I want to thank, particularly Misty Brown, but her staff, member James Bain, who has been essential in a lot of this work. So I'm going to turn it over to Sarah, who is our technical expert, along with Trenton, and they'll tag team on this first presentation about what's happening with the levee raise. Here you go, Sarah.
Okay. Good evening, and thank you for everyone for being here. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, share the presentation that we're doing. Okay, so tonight we're going to give you a project update on the Kansas City's Levees project. And as Melissa was saying, this is considered a mega project, but I think even in the Corps' world, a $500 million project that is designed in less than 3 years is a huge deal. So this is a large project, and the first and foremost purpose of the project was and is flood reduction. As you can see here, there are multiple partners on this project. The Corps is the program manager and the main designer on this project. Also, the consultant H&TB, the design firm, is another designer that is contracted through the Corps and did a lot of the levee design. And then the project partners are the Unified Government, Kaw Valley Drainage District, and Kansas City, Missouri. So the Kansas City Levees project is 17 miles of levee improvements, flood wall raises, relief well renovations, flood pump station rehab and repair. And as you can see here, it covers the Argentine, Armourdale, and Central Industrial District levee units. This project is a fully federally funded project. It is over $500 million, $529 million project that includes construction, design, real estate acquisition, railroad agreements. And as you can see here, the total value of protection that the Corps did their cost benefit analysis on was at $9.5 billion. As you can see here, the different levee units talk about how many, the population that is protected by the levee unit, the structures that are behind each of these levee units, as well as the property values. This is a really great kind of overall summary of what all these benefits are with this levee project. Another thing I would like to recognize is the partnerships of this project. As we said, this was a very fast-moving project, and not only was this designed in less than 3 years, I think it was more like a year and a half. There was some time of feasibility to begin with, but this also, the Unified Government had a lot of tasks to complete in a very short time. And with this partnership, we were able to do everything necessary in order to bid out for the Corps to bid out this project on schedule, and able to make sure that they secured those funds, because the money was allocated for this project, but it wasn't guaranteed. So we needed to be moving dirt as fast as we can. This is definitely one of the, well, the largest UG project. And this is something, this amount of value coming into our community is huge. Bringing in lots of future protection and development and economic stimulus through this project. Here is a program, just another program overview. One of the things to point out that is, pretty amazing is the amount of fill that we have for this project. 1 million cubic yards of dirt. I don't have the calculation off the top of my head of how many truckloads that is, but it is, a very large number. And we are getting that dirt from 3 areas, or I should call dirt fill, from 3 areas in Wyandotte County. And, so this is a big endeavor. And so I'll talk a little bit later about what that means for the public. The team is another thing to point out. There were over 200 team members between the Corps of Engineers, between the project partners, between the consultants that both the Corps of Engineers and the project partners hired to assist us with this project. So there was a lot of people working on this project. And, the things that UG was very involved in were the easements and the utility coordination. The other thing to point out is the not only were we working with over 150 parcels and property owners and utility contacts, we have been coordinating with 3 of the railroads in this area. So the levee units are all adjacent or intersecting of these rails. And so coordination has been very intense and ongoing with the railroads for this project. So one of the first, the project components, the main, one of the main ones is the levee and flood wall raises, as I mentioned. So in the areas where we have earthen levees, most of those will be raised approximately 5 feet. It changes in different areas. There's also flood wall raises. So we currently have flood wall, and in those cases, those flood walls will be raised as well. I will say that the Corps has done an amazing job of lessening their impact on adjacent property owners. So part of their design was to look at minimizing their impact. And so in some cases, a levee raise would have impacted the property owner too much, so that they went back in with a flood wall instead. So there was constant coordination between the design teams and the property owners to make sure that the impact of this project, the benefits were there, and we lessened our impact on them. This project was bid out. It was it was advertised. Well, it was there. They did a pre-qualification. There was 9 contractors that were selected for the pre-qualified for pre-qualifications, and out of those 9, I believe 5 bid on the project, and it was a low bid project, and that came in significantly under the Corps' estimate at $257 million, and with Lane Construction, which is located, I think they're headquartered out of Connecticut, but they have worked on local Corps projects here, just finishing up with, I believe it's a Casey Mo project, I believe it's Swope Park. So they are familiar with the area, and they do have a really good reputation. So construction, they're working through their scheduling right now, and construction will start here at the end of the summer. They hope to be moving dirt, and with a completion date of April 2026. So I'm now going to pass over to Trenton Vogelsong to talk about the pump station repair and replacements and the UG betterments.
Thank you. So just a real quick overview of how our stormwater system works with the rivers here. Of course, we all know rainwater hits the ground and flows downhill. So it either flows overland or through pipes. And so long as the river's down low, it goes out through some gravity pipes that we have and goes out to the river. As the river comes up, it would be contained and interior low-lying areas be protected from the river flooding by this levee system, which is being modified, of course. And so at some point we start closing gates and valves so the river water doesn't come back up through those pipes and flood that interior area. And that all works great as long as we don't get any rain. The river can continue to rise and everything's fine and dandy. But if we get any rainfall, it would flow downhill and encounter those same gates. And now that water doesn't have anywhere to go. So we have a series of flood pump stations strategically located to pump that rainwater, interior drainage water up over the levee to the river to protect our citizens and area from being flooded by that interior drainage water. So most of those flood pump stations are constructed in or very close to the levee system. So when the Corps is looking at the protecting everyone from the river flooding, the pump station structures themselves represent a potential mode of failure. And so most of what they were looking at doing was structural mods to those pump stations to reduce the risk of failure there. What we were able to do with them was also work to try to get some betterments in with the pump stations. But real quick on this page, this mostly just covers what the Corps was doing for the structural reliability standpoint. In the Argentine unit, they were working on 3 pump stations, 2 of which were total replacements. One is the Strong Avenue flood pump station, which was built in the levee that probably no one's ever seen it, but you will see the new one. It's being constructed just on the east side of the South Patrol Police Station down on Metropolitan. And the other one that's being totally replaced is Caw Valley Drainage District pump station, and it's north of there, just north of the Burlington Northern Rail Yard. The other pump stations in Armourdale, they're touching 5 of our pump stations and demoing one that was still in standing but not in service. And then they're modifying one over in CID at the Call Point site. When we talk about betterments, these are opportunities that we seized upon that served more our purpose and our objectives, that kind of went above and beyond what the Corps' real charge was. And that included things like new programmable logic controllers to control the pump operations. Most of the pumps were ended up getting replaced by the Corps just by the nature of the project itself, but we paid additional monies to upsize those. And that's one of the big wins we got here too. We kind of listed some of the capacities here. You can read them. We doubled the pumping capacity in the Argentine area, more than doubled. We added 70% in the Armourdale area, and we nearly doubled it at the Ohio pump station in CID. And so what that means is when we get rainfall events in these pump stations in service, we're going to see a lot less water backup and a lot less flooding. I'm going to talk a little bit more on that here in just a second. But this was really a great partnership for the Corps to achieve their objectives. And then we also got a lot of system renewal in these facilities that aged anywhere from 60 to 100 years old. So they were definitely due. So when we talk about the capacity upgrades, here's some numbers. 275,000 gallons per minute was kind of the base pumping capacity that the Corps was going to provide us. What we were able to do was add 210,000 GPM to it. So there's the total. So that's pretty impressive. But what is that? I don't even know that I know what 1,000 GPM really looks like. I'm sure you guys don't. So we thought we'd present it in a little bit different way. So how many Olympic-sized swimming pools per day can we pump now? So The base case from the Corps was going to be 620 of those pools in a 24-hour period. We added 410 for a total of just over 1,000. Another way to look at it would be how many, if City Hall was a tank of water, how many City Halls are we going to pump? So City Hall is about 21 Olympic-sized pools. So the base case was going to be 30. We added 20. So now in 24 hours, we're going to be able to pump 50 City Halls worth of water. So I just thought that was a fun way to present that a little bit differently. But putting that back down to the low-lying areas, if you took that water and spread it out over the shaded areas here, which is Argentine, Armourdale, and CID, it added, just the betterments added almost 4 inches of water now that we can pump out of that area in a 24-hour period. So anyway, I think that's a great thing we should all celebrate, and along with the reliability.
I'd like to mention that the UG betterments with the pump stations that Trenton was talking about, if we were to do those on our own, it would be, Trenton was saying probably somewhere, $50 million to do that. And the bid prices came in for those at a little over $4 million. So as you can see, utilizing this contract, putting in these betterments is, both a benefit to our community as well as a cost savings to our budget, and something that we're able to do within the next 5 years. So the other items that I mentioned earlier that the UG as a project partner is that we need to do are called LERDs. And those are land acquisitions, easements, right-of-ways, relocations, which fall under utilities, and disposals and investigations of hazardous waste. So we had a really great real estate team, which included Oric and Erskine, their law firm, as well as James Bain in our legal department. And like I mentioned, we had over 150 real estate easement acquisitions, that we, Tim met with each property owner to discuss the project, to sign the documents. And another great thing that the Corps did by minimizing their impact on the surrounding properties, out of over 150 easements, there was only 2 total property acquisitions, which if you think about 17 miles of, a $500 million project, only 2 acquisitions is just an amazing win for the area. So we were able to get all of the easements that we needed. Those easements the UG did pay over $10 million on those. However, we are able to get reimbursed by the Corps, and we are in the process right now of submitting those reimbursements. Because this is a fully funded project, we are eligible for reimbursements on everything besides public easements. So everything that we acquired is going to be reimbursed to us. In normal federal cost share projects, it's a 35-65 split. So if you did the math on a $550 million project with 35-65, you can see that, we also, got a huge win for having this be fully funded. The other item that UG is coordinating is the utility relocations. So when the design started on this project, both the Corps and our consultant HNTB, who acted as our agent, met with all of the utilities to look at all of the different areas where there were conflicts and work with them to get those the relocation plans in place. Some of the relocations need to happen before construction starts, and some of the relocations need to happen during the project. So once we get a schedule from the contractor, we will continue coordination through monthly coordination meetings with these utilities. Another item to mention is that a lot of these utility relocations are covered by the federal project. So we will be, they will be getting reimbursed for some of the utility relocations. And we went through all of that analysis to determine that. The other big thing that we've been working on is the permits and agreements with the railroad. Any work being done within their right of way, we have permits that we go through. The last item is the hazardous waste investigations and disposal. So we only had a few sites that we looked at. We will be responsible for that during construction as well. So we have a consultant that will be helping us with that. Another big item coming up is the public outreach. So a lot of, the public outreach that has happened, that has already occurred over the past year and a half, has mainly been with the property owners by getting the easements, and then with the utility contacts that we have. So the next stage of public outreach that we are going to be undertaking is the public. As I said, we will be bringing in 1 million, cubic yards of fill to be placed along these 17 miles. So there will be a lot of truck traffic. There's going to be, we anticipate there will be a lot of calls coming in, a lot of questions from people asking what's going on. So we want to be set up a plan where we provide information to the commissioners, we provide information to the mayor's office, to our call center, so that everyone kind of is continually updated and will be able to answer the questions or to point them in the right direction. And I want to point out that the Corps of Engineers has set up, and I hope this works, a really great website. And we've been working with them on making sure that, these are the things that we see as very important to have on the website. And one of the things that I think is really great that they have added is this interactive map. And our hope here is that, so we will, or
We're not seeing it right now, Sarah. We're not seeing it. We're seeing it in PowerPoint.
Okay, I'm sorry.
It's okay. Take your time and switch it real quick.
Okay, let me stop sharing really quick. I apologize for that. Are you guys seeing it now? The website? Okay. So this is the website. It's going to have a lot of information. It already has a lot of information, and the Corps will be updating this with current construction photos and information. They also have a contact form where people can ask questions or submit complaints or anything there. One of the things that we did have them add is this interactive map, with the hope that, so their plan is to have areas where they're currently under construction, areas maybe, and kind of the timeline for that, when you could plan to see them entering into an area. So I think this will be very helpful for us to have linked on our website and be able to navigate, people can navigate and find out when they can expect construction to be happening in their area, especially with this being a 5-year construction project. That seems very important. So let me just get back here real quick. And I believe, I apologize, this kind of got messed up. The last thing here is just the project status that we've kind of talked about, is that all of the projects now have been awarded. We have the pump station projects going on. They're in construction. Earth is being moved. Things are happening. And then the levee raise contract awarded, and construction should be starting here in the end of the summer. So we'll pause now for any questions, comments on this portion before we move into the betterment section.
Sarah, I think that's your cue to keep moving.
Okay, wonderful. So let me bring up the next presentation. Okay, so one of the items that Trenton mentioned was the ability for betterments. And one of the things that kind of came about right at the beginning is the having the levee be an asset and not an obstruction to the river. And so one of the things that we looked at right at the beginning was kind of the riverfront vision and looking at how the levee, what we could do with the project for recreation. And so the following things have been designed into the project currently for that went out to bid would be the levee trail system. We requested and designed upgraded trail surfacing. So in some spots that is concrete and in some spots that is an enhanced aggregate that is used for trails. We also during design coordinated our desired access points for trailheads and to access the levee trails. So along the levees, on top, yep.
Yes, Commissioner Bynum has her hand raised.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
Thanks, Mayor. I realized I did have a question after you moved on. First of all, thanks for all this incredible work. It's really mind-boggling. But with regard to all of the work being done, in part one of the presentation, since that's all federal money, I guess we can know that all of those workers are being paid prevailing wage. Would that be true?
Are you done with this?
I don't know if I can answer that. Scott Mensing is on the phone with the Corps. He's the program manager. Since they contract out the construction project, maybe he can answer that.
And the follow-up question is, I'd like that answer tonight if we know it. The follow-up question might need a little bit more research, but with that level of investment and so many people engaged, do we have any idea, or can we get to some idea of how many Wyandotte County residents might be participating in the employment that has to be going on with such a large project? And I realize that may need some work, but if I could know that first answer, that'd be great. Thanks.
Hey, Sarah, this is Scott. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
Okay. Hey, so my name's Scott Mensing. I'm program manager for the Corps, as I was introduced earlier. And ma'am, I'm not a contracting officer, and I don't, or an attorney, so I don't like to try to pretend I'm one either. But the Corps is required to follow the Davis-Bacon Act, which dictates our wage rates. So it's hard to get into how it relates to prevailing wage and union rates, but our specs do include the Davis-Bacon wage rate that our contractors are required to follow.
Thank you. That's great.
Okay. So, and regarding your second question regarding the amount of local interest that is, or locals that are potentially employed by the project, specifically by our contractors, I do not have that information. We do not have, at least at this point, not on the large levee contract. We may have it to a certain extent on the 3 pump station contracts, but that's more by company, not so much where the employees of the subcontractors live. The three contractors that we have are Lane Construction, which is based out of Connecticut, but it's a global company. Michael's Construction is doing the Argentine pump stations. They're based out of Wisconsin, but I know that they're using Kissick. They're using a lot of local subs. And then the other Armadale CID pump stations is Supplied Industrial Solutions and Goodwin Brothers. The same thing. I know they're using a lot of locals. And I'm not sure, honestly, I don't know. I don't believe I'm privy to the information to know exactly who they're using. But I'll dig into what I can. I know I don't have the information for Lane because we were asked that question yesterday, and I do not have it. But I will follow up with Melissa and Sarah and get you all what I can for the other 3 contracts.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So I'll go ahead and move on with the levee trails. So we did request for the upgraded trail surfacing. We also requested for upgraded gates, so that those would be the pedestrian gates that would not allow the vehicular traffic unless it was maintenance vehicles. So we hope that that makes everything, you know, safer and restricts vehicles on the levee. The other thing is that we worked through design on how to create a fully connected system. And one of the things that we were able to get in the project is some of the trails do dip down under bridges more towards the river. So we were able to get that added into the grading, which was a significant cost savings. Those numbers were estimated at with our engineer's estimate and the bid prices did come in at 2.7 million. So we are very, excited about that. One of the other things that we did look at is how to bring people, to the river and what kind of event space we could have there. We looked at an amphitheater concept that I know Melissa's going to go into a little bit later, but we did H&TB was our designer on that, and they did design something that was technically feasible with the levee project and not have any negative impacts on the river. And we got that to 90% design. However, we did pause that because we realized the other items going on at the time with the Armadale master plan, that we wanted to make sure that we were aligning the vision for the riverfront area and make sure we discussed options with the stakeholders and the commission. This came out of our master plan that we did for the levee trails. We did this pre-COVID last year, and we had a lot of really great input through a survey and a public meeting on the proposed levee trail network. So these items were included into the project. The next steps on this is to work on the design of the trailheads and the other amenities on the levee trail that will be able to be put in after the levee project comes through in 5 years. Like to also point out that we have a partner with Procter & Gamble that wants to build a trailhead off of their location. And we're working with them on designing that to be to kind of memorialize them being in the area for, I believe, over 150 years. And so we also, we have a lot of exciting things going on with the trails, as well as some grants from Mark. So one of the other things going on, I'm not going in depth with the Armadale master plan, but we were able to participate in some of the steering committee meetings and really got to understand kind of the history of the area and hear from citizens on, what the vision is for Armadale. And, a lot of the things was the connectivity and how the levee trails is a form of connection between this area, and we hope to accomplish that with this project. And then there's also a lot of other developments going on in the area. So I'm going to go ahead and pass over to Melissa, and she can talk about kind of the momentum in the area.
Right. Thank you, Sarah. So Sarah, go ahead, next slide. So we are obviously working on a whole litany of things as a unified government and a governing body, and with our development community. Yards Phase 2 right now, as well as our next project we're going to talk about with Flying Truss, the Rock Island Bridge development. And these are kind of catalytic ideas or events occurring along our waterfront. And we wanted to make sure that what we were doing with the levee project, our design team, the Army Corps, and HNTB and others that have been working with us, to make sure that whatever others' visions were, that we were able to make sure that we could make those dreams come true, as well as providing the amenities that the folks visioning with us in the Armourdale Master Plan are talking about as well. So next slide, Sarah. We've done a lot of work. We've also seen a presentation, some of you in the last couple of days, with KC DC, the design group out of K-State, about looking at the history of the area, understanding what's feasible within the spaces along the river, and what kind of construction issues and needs we'll have. So all of this identification has been going on in the background. Looking at access types, Sarah noted for just access for the levee trails, what we need there, but we also have to marry that with the access that we need to do the maintenance on the levees with Cobb Valley's work. And then looking for inspiration on sort of what those public spaces might be, and alternatives for how we might define our potential public spaces along the river. And then, of course, as Sarah noted, recreational programming, whether it's kayaking on the river, trails, races, outdoor live events, things of that nature. Go ahead, next slide, Sarah. So here's some just inspirational photos of things that we've all been looking at. I know that many of you have talked about other places that you've been and seen, and we've been talking about that with folks that we're working on with this project, and we'll be continuing to talk to you about those. These are just different cities. I believe on here is Louisville, Baltimore, and a few others that I'm not recognizing, but I know that there's a lot of riverfront development going on in old historic industrial areas within the United States. And I think we're trying to leverage that with this project, making sure that can happen through design and engineering, as well as working with our community groups and partnerships. Go ahead, next slide, Sarah. So one of the things that we've noted throughout this process in our conversations is that people want to be up and along the river. We want to have access for our community to the river. Those are things we've been hearing when we've been out in the different conversations that we've had, whether it was on the trails a couple of years ago now, I think it was, or with the Armourdale plan. Neighborhoods want to feel part of the river, as well as folks want to have access to use the water if they so choose. Go ahead, Sarah. We also started looking at, with the development community, sort of their preferred way of interacting with the river for development. And what we found are a couple of things that are important for how we shape our work going forward. And that is to really be connected to the river and not have the levee or levee wall be an impediment to how we interact. And so these are things we're going to be working on with Sarah's team, Scott's team with the Corps of Engineers, as well as our partners with HNTB, and then folks like Flaherty Collins with the Arts too, and others that come along in the future, how we interplay with the river and continue to make it feel part of our community instead of something that is hidden behind a wall. Go ahead. Just had a lot of concepts that we were thinking about and looking at, and I would encourage all of you to continue to do that as well. There's lots of things where you can have very design spaces that we've talked about that have very specific intentional purposes, to spaces that are activated by programming. So they may look open a lot of the time, then have major events occur at them. And then you have other places where you have elements that are more park-like, where they kind of have, you know, the recreational features that are fairly defined, or defined in a way that you can explore them. Go ahead, Sarah. I'm not sure if, there we go. The things that we've been hearing through these conversations is that there's a balance that we probably need to strike as we do this work between areas that can be activated in a variety of ways through programming, and those that have some permanent elements that truly lend themselves to a type of functionality. Go ahead, Sarah. And here are some of the preferred elements we've been hearing with our engagements with the community and with our business partners. Things like action with water that's not the river necessarily, but adjacent to it. You know, the amphitheater, which we've discussed already here, and ability to have, you know, things to do with eating, because, you know, that's always our favorite way to recreate. And just here's a design of some of the work that's been being done that Sarah mentioned that we've had tested as part of the programs up to this point with the levee raise, to ensure that we weren't having an adverse impact on the whole purpose of this entire project, which is flood protection. And that's the heart of everything that is being worked on at all times. And so you can see by using an earthen levee, we have an advantage to be able to create these kind of elements that get you down closer to the river. And as it's noted on the last bullet here, a bowl form is the best form for not raising water levels. Go ahead, Rob, there, Sarah. And for this, we'll just open it to questions. Sarah has maybe a couple of comments on next steps and what we're doing to round out our engagement at this point of the project. And I'm sure Doug will have some comments as well.
Yeah, so the next steps of our engagement include presenting to you guys some of these ideas. And then we are in coordination with the development that is going on in the area with the Yards 2, the Rock Island Bridge, and now the KC Boat Club that is located already in this area. So we have coordination meetings, and we are working at how do we collaborate on these spaces, these shared spaces, and make sure that all of our visions are intersecting and not conflicting. And then kind of our role in the UG is to act as a liaison to the Corps and to the KC Levees project that is going to be happening, and working through schedules, making sure that there's not major conflicts between all of the different development and projects going on.
Doug, that is our presentation for the evening.
Thank you both, and Trenton as well. Very good presentation, good information on where we're at. As you can see, there's been a lot happening with this project, and I think as noted early on when Sarah was going through it, that the Corps was moving on this project at a fast pace to design, get it in place, and moving forward where they are today has been a monumental effort, and it is on track and moving forward. So we're really excited about what's happening and excited about some opportunities here for our ability to engage the river in a way we never have before. Mayor, at this time, we take any questions you may have.
Thank you. Any comments or questions from the commission?
Right.
All right.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. We'll move on to the next part of our presentation, our economic development incentive report. This is a report that we did last year for the first time in this kind of detail. You received with your agenda package on Monday about a 60-some page report that went into great detail of what was being what we have, in addition to a PowerPoint that we're going to step through this evening. I will say this, as we look at a year of 2020 as one that where we dealt with a pandemic and we had a lot of very difficult times in the world of economic development. And I guess I'll say, like we saw with the levee project, a lot of work continued to happen in a lot of other areas, even though we had many staff and resources devoted to the pandemic. Areas of economic development saw a lot of progress as well, and we're able to show some of this to you as now, as well as some of the older projects we have and how they're performing. With that, I'm going to turn this over to Kathleen Von Atchen, our Chief Financial Officer, who's going to lead the team in the presentation this evening, and then be followed up with the other members of the team. Kathleen?
Thank you, Doug. So the team that we'll be presenting tonight is myself, Elise Villarreal, who's in the finance department, Debbie Johnsher in the finance department, Stephanie Moore, who is in economic development, and we have a guest coming who is on leave right now, but has come just for this presentation, Catherine Carter, and so she's going to take it from here.
Great, thank you so much. It's great to see you all, and look forward to getting back and working on some more projects here. But if you go to the next slide, thank you. So this, as both Doug and Kathleen mentioned, is our second year that we've done this incentive report, and I think it's particularly important to see for a variety of reasons, but one of which is that economic development, just at its nature, is such a wide-reaching kind of area of what a city does. So not only does it reach a bunch of different departments within the city, so the economic development department, my team, works with finance, legal, the administrator's office, as well as the Wyandotte EDC, as well as chambers, KCADC, et cetera. The list goes on. But also the economic development really hits every single one of the commission priorities. So variety of projects reduce blight, increase safety, increase community health, increase economic prosperity for sure. So you can see kind of our purpose really is to hit these community goals across the entire KCK. Next slide. So has the unified government been successful? I think that is a resounding yes. As Doug mentioned, this has been a very challenging year to 2020 for many reasons, mostly pandemic related. But in terms of development, we had a number of things already in kind of in the hopper and moving forward. But then also it kind of opened up a different focus in terms of distribution, logistics, things that we were already kind of experts in. And then those were some areas where, just kind of happened that distribution and multifamily were two of the areas that banks were still lending, things were still moving, and this was a great time to really take advantage of what KCK kind of the needs were and what we are particularly good at. So the really kind of exciting thing is that in 2020, we had nearly, and it kind of depends how you define whether we're just over or just under, but about, we'll say approximately $1 billion worth of investment in KCK and Wyandotte County in that year, which is pretty much the largest we can think of as far as we've gone back and tracked, particularly a year that does not include any GM, kind of a giant investment there, or even really any. There was the Proton building in at KU, but no massive investment there. So this really shows kind of a wide variety of different projects across the city. Next slide. So one of the things, and I'll just kind of give a really brief overview, and then we'll kind of dive into each of these in much greater detail. But really the goal of economic development, and I think what a city's purpose is to make sure that there is development and things happening across the entire city. So we don't want to focus on a specific area or a specific type of development. So we're pretty excited just by how 2020 turned out, that there really is, great investment across the entirety of our city and county, as well as a variety of different levels. So you see these massive projects, particularly out west. You've got Urban Outfitters, that's over 2,000 jobs and $403 million worth of investment. If you've gone by there, you can see that they are moving, and they're already kind of foundation going in and building, as well as something like Home Field, over 1,000 jobs, a variety of different levels of investment. But this first kind of phase that we'll be moving into here shortly is about $90 million. And that does not include kind of all the ancillary retail and things that will be coming kind of along with this project. And then there are kind of the very significant projects, but that are more scattered throughout the city. So having another Menards. So a Menards at 18th and I-35, another great project. This is a site that would not have been able to really develop almost anything else. You really needed something that had a lot of capacity for some significant site costs, as well as KCK-CC, their student housing. It's another great project, as well as other housing multifamily projects, more in the core of the city, especially downtown. The Merck opened up. We've got a lot of kind of smaller projects have dotted throughout the entire city that really are focused on that community base, kind of neighborhood level. So the Merck opening, Junior Achievement is another great project down in Rosedale that will see just about every elementary school child in the entire metro will come experience that location and be in KCK, which is a great just way to expose really the entire metro area to all the great things we have going on here. As well as something like Split Log, a very kind of humble project, but one that as soon as we're kind of back to normal, I anticipate I'll see many of you there, and we'll kind of keep having meetings at that location now, which will be larger and more spread out. So, with kind of what you'll hear as we get into this presentation, is we do have a variety of tools. And I think the big thing is how do we use these tools? And really what we've been focusing on is how to use these tools to the best community benefit. So this is not about just getting an investment in, but this is an investment that will have, pay dividends and help the community in those goals that were previously stated. So with that, I will turn it over. I think Stephanie has the next section. This is just a list of all the different tools that you'll be hearing about today. I will mention that there are others on this list that are much smaller, such as what was used for Split Log. They received a small business grant, not incredibly significant, $10,000, but that was enough to get them kind of over the hump and make that significant investment. So with that, I will turn it over to the group, and thanks. It's great to see everyone.
Thank you, Catherine. It's great to see you.
Just a moment. Commissioner McKernan has his hand up.
Thank you, Mayor. Catherine, it is good to see you. And I know that you have it on some of the later slides in this presentation, but I just want to remind you and remind all of the team that $1 billion of development is really good, but a lot of that is money that churns around us. And so what I want to make sure we always do when we talk about development, we want to talk about the economic impact on us in terms of increased revenues, in terms of other things that flow into the county that we can use for the provision of city and county services. So $1 billion is a great number, but people have to realize we don't get $1 billion. That's money that just waves around us. So let's always just keep that in mind. Thank you.
I think Catherine touched on this. Debbie, you're not doing this slide, are you? We didn't have a dress rehearsal, guys. We can move to the next slide and I'll go over some of these incentives tools with you, starting with the NRA, the Neighborhood Revitalization Act. You can go to the next slide. So we just renewed the plan. So you guys might be familiar with some of this, but it started back in 1999 as a way to revitalize through rehab and new construction projects for both single family and commercial. So it's a great tool to use for a wide variety of projects throughout Kansas City, Kansas. And so what it does, it provides a tax rebate on those additional taxes levied from the result of those improvements of that construction. And we just renewed it for 5 years and went into effect January 1st of this year. Next. Oops. Okay. So you might recall we simplified and consolidated that middle section, that green section, area 2, to make it easier on everybody. So this is kind of a breakdown of area 1, 2, 3, and the shaded areas, and then the breakdown of commercial and residential. Next. And then this even breaks it out even more. For the last 10 years, we've had 289, and so we have 289 active on the books right now, and 50 of those are commercial and 239 are residential. So over that 10 years, that 19 million is what has been rebated back to our, so there's some money going right back to our owners and developers. And then this talks about the pre-construction value is at 52 million. And then after construction and after everything's been appraised, we've gone up to 136. So that's a 3 times the increase. That's a lot of return on investment. But the UG also gets taxes. So we're not giving it all back. We still get some taxes out of that, 1.16. And then I want to show you the map again, because I'm going to give you some examples of some recent examples of residential and commercial. And the ones I picked are actually in area 1. So you'll get to see 2 of those coming up next. So this is my favorite one. This is a beautiful renovation in Rosedale. And the one on the left looks, that's the before, a very historic kitchen. And then we've got the after picture. It reminds me of something on HGTV. That was their sales pitch, the ad for that house. It's quite beautiful. And we'll move on to a commercial. So this is Success Trucking, and it's right on the border of KCK and Kansas City, Missouri, over the James Street Bridge. So I got the before, the during, and the after of that project. So it can help commercial, it can help single family. It's a great program. And then we'll move on to the IRBs. And that's the industrial revenue bonds. And you guys just approved that policy last month. So this might be familiar as well, but it's to create a positive business environment and stimulate economic growth and development in order to encourage capital investments, employment opportunities, and quality services for the benefit of the entire community. So here's just a snapshot. We picked 2006. So over the last 15 years, we've had 36 IRBs issued. 30 of those are still active. And then we have 6 graduated. We just kept those on the list just to keep it round. So 941 million is issued, but that's the UG is not accountable for that. It does not impact our budget or any of our books. It's just a tool that we use to help increase investment. And the next slide is a map. So this is going to look a little weird because there's only 18 dots, but that's because some of our locations like PQ down in Armourdale, they have about 14 separate IRB, separate series. So that's not, Mike Grimm and I were going back and forth on how to show you guys the dots and try to be, so there's not 30 dots on the map. So next slide. And this is a really good graphic to illustrate the expected revenue back to the UG as those IRBs graduate and come back onto the tax rolls. So this is for all the taxing jurisdictions. That will include the school districts and the unified government. So finance put that slide together for us. I think it's a really good impact to show the benefit. Next slide. And then this got a lot of information on it, but let's just take it slow. So as we have this 130 or the 36 projects, the initial appraised value before they started was 193 million. And then we look at 2021's appraised values, that brings it up almost 252% to that 494. So that increase is quite substantial. So it's a great program. And then we look at the estimated taxes coming back to the jurisdictions of that 12 million, and then 5 million will come directly back to the unified government. And if take any questions at this point. If not, I'll pass it on to Elise.
Thanks, Stephanie.
Sure.
As mentioned earlier, I'm Elise Villarreal, and I'm the debt coordinator in the finance office for the UG. I work on all like the financing of the CMIP debt projects, but I also get to help out economic development. In my department, we assist with like reviewing the development agreements, developing and evaluating the pro formas before you guys approve the projects. And we also administer the payments of many of the incentives. So for the bond issues, we'll administer the payments to bond trustees if we directly receive the money. And then we also administer the pay-go payments. So we review all of these projects periodically. Every time there's a property tax payments, or even monthly for those that have incremental sales or CID sales, TDD sales tax pledges, we're reviewing them every month. So this slide shows what Catherine was saying earlier, how we have projects spread all throughout the county, which is really important for us. And each one of these has been through thorough evaluation and negotiations by the Economic Development Department to construct a development agreement with an incentive package that's really tailored to each and every one of the projects. So comparing one project to another, it's not always apples to apples, because there's not just different incentives pledged, but also different levels of incentives pledged. Some have 100% property tax increment pledged, and others, they tailor it back after a certain amount of years. So before we continue, can we go back up to slide 5 real quick? Let me go there too here. Yes, that one. Perfect. Thank you. So Stephanie already touched on the NRA and the IRB incentives, but I just wanted, for anybody who's not familiar with these incentives, I wanted to make sure that it's understood what we say when we mean TIF or CID or TDD. So tax increment financing, just the quick and dirty for it, is the taxing jurisdictions, we set a base prior to the project, and the taxing jurisdictions continue to receive the base, and then the increments that's generated from the project goes, it could either all be pledged or a portion of it can be pledged. So when we talk about that increment, that's the increased value in either property, sometimes also sales, that goes toward the project. And then CID and TDD, Community Improvement District and Transportation Development District, those are additional taxes that are levied in the district. And each one has a statute that governs what the proceeds can be spent on. TDD is a lot more restrictive than CID, but and sometimes there's also a section of the statute that allows it to be not an additional sales tax in the district, but rather an assessment that's levied along with the property taxes. And we have one of those projects later on. And then sales tax and revenue bonds, most everybody is familiar with, like the Homefield project, for example. That's a partnership between the state and local where sales tax revenues, the increment is pledged to the project. Thank you. We can jump back down to where we were now. Let's see. Okay. So the report that you've received, it contains a whole section of project pages. Each has some basic information about a project. We've got the project description, the location in the county so you can orient yourself, what was pledged, a very simplified terms and conditions. If you really want the detail on that, the DA is the best place for that. Also, how much was public versus private contribution, the status of the project, top taxpayers, vendors in the area, and the liability status. So these next two slides just kind of are an example of the project pages, so that if you leave here and you are thinking about a project and you want to know exactly where to go, we've tried to keep it pretty basic, and then that way we just get to the bottom line. If you have a question, you can see exactly how the project's doing. So in the upper left-hand corner, we have where it's at in the county, a little indicator there. We have the project terms and conditions along with the public and private contributions below that. We've got some key facts sometimes below that. And then we've got some little check marks below that I'll speak about a little later. On the right-hand side, we try to include pictures of the project along with a simple description. The status is below that. And then the top businesses in the district. The next page, and sometimes the third page too of the project, if there's that many incentives pledged, is a map of each district or pledge boundary. That way you can see exactly where we're talking about. And the bottom section is where you're going to want to refer to when you want to see how the project's doing. This is the section where we include a box, like where it says TIF with the blue square. That's the basic information about the district, when it was created, how long it runs through, what's pledged, and how it's financed. And then the purple section below it, the purple box below it, is called the bond performance or the project performance box. And that's where we give you the details on what's pledged or what kind of payments we're making and how those are doing. So if we go to the next slide, here's where we talk about how when we evaluate project performance, we're coming from the perspective of, is the project paying off its liabilities? If the project's pay-go, then there's no risk to the UG, no risk to the taxpayers. And I mean, other than the question about whether or not we're using the highest and best use of the land, or something similar to that, whether a similar or better development would occur had we waited. Those types of questions are taken into account before the project's approved. And so, for pay-go purposes, we're considering no risk. Now, special obligation bonds, those are backed solely by revenues within the project area. And so they're only a limited risk to the UG because no additional revenues outside of that is pledged. Special obligation with annual appropriation backing and general obligation, also known as GO bonds, those are the most risky for the UG because we pledge revenues outside of the district. So for a general obligation bond, if we financed a project and the project revenues don't come in, then we must use our full taxing power to pay the debt service on those. So we always try to go toward pay-go. In very special circumstances, we'll do special obligation bonds, and it has to be very special to move along that continuum. These are the categories that we're evaluating by. These were the check boxes at the bottom. Does revenue cover expense? Is the project going to pay off on schedule? Did it improve community resources? Was there significant private investment? And does it help to diversify and strengthen our tax base? This update really focuses on the first two because the last three are really criteria that are considered prior to project approval. A project wouldn't be approved if it wasn't desirable for the community, if there wasn't a significant private development that wouldn't otherwise occur without these incentives, and if we didn't believe that it would contribute to the community. So those are kind of given unless the project is brand new. So Debbie and I are going to switch back and forth that way. It's a little less monotonous, not just my voice. We have a little bit of variety. And so Debbie, I believe you have the next few slides.
Yes, thank you, Elise. Debbie Johnsher, Deputy CFO. So this next slide is showing the number of projects we have by the type of incentive. The largest group that you can see is property tax TIF projects. There are 24. And as we said, TIF projects are where the new TIF increment that is generated from the development is what is pledged towards the project. The next group are sales tax projects incentives. We have 13 CID projects and 8 TDD projects. And the CID and TDD sales tax that's generated by this additional tax is what is pledged towards the project. We have 8 projects that are sales tax rebates. The sales tax rebates are where either the sales tax that's being generated or the new increment of sales tax that's collected because of the development is pledged to reimburse eligible expenses. So this is not an additional tax such as a CID or TDD. We have 3 economic development grant projects, and these are bonds that are issued under our home rule ordinance. We have 3 projects that are have transient guest tax revenues pledged, and these would be developments that have hotels being built within the project. We also have 2 NRAs and 1 property tax rebate project.
I'm sorry, Debbie, you said there are 2 NRA projects?
Yes.
Are those just commercial projects, industrial, or also?
Let me, in a couple of slides, I've got a list of all of them, and I'll look at those 2 when we get there.
Okay, Commissioner McKiernan?
Thank you, Mayor. Just to clarify, when we say pledge to the project, we mean additional tax revenue that's generated but is not coming to us in the short run. We have pledged to defer collecting that money for a period of time so that we can get that development created in whatever area it's going to be created in. For example, earlier when Stephanie showed that slide that $5.6 million of additional tax revenue was going to flow into the UG, I think it's important that we emphasize that's not today. That is going to come in gradually over time as the incentive that we give for a project, or as the increment that we pledge to the project gradually gets less and less, with more and more coming to us. So I think it's important that people understand this is a long game. We've got to be in this for the long haul, because while we get the amenities quick, the additional tax revenues may not come as fast and may seem to more trickle in over time. Thank you.
That's correct. For instance, on a TIF project, once the project plan is approved, there's a 20-year time period with which we can collect that increment for a project. And then once the 20-year clock is finished, or if there's debt issued and we collect enough TIF revenue to pay off the debt early and close out the TIF district, then those revenues would start coming back to us and would be distributed to all the taxing entities.
That's right. I'd also like to add that on TIF projects, there's a certain amount that's not pledged to the project. There's 20 mils for the school district. So for school districts, they get to realize a portion of that for immediately once the project is developed, whereas we do have to wait for that to come in. And then for the CID and the TDD type projects, those are sales taxes that are implemented for a period of time to reimburse the project, and then those end up going away, and we don't actually receive those revenues unless it's to reimburse us for some public costs that we've put into it.
Okay, we'll go on to the next slide. This one looks at how the projects are financed. So we've got each of the projects listed. So you can see we have 34 projects that are pay-go. As Elise said, our preference is to do pay-go because this provides no risk to the city. We don't issue any bonds. We're not paying any funds up front. The project is reimbursed as pledged revenues are received, and any shortfall that would occur with the revenues would fall to the developer of the project, not the unified government. We have 11 projects that are financed with the revenue bonds. The bonds are issued at the beginning of the project to fund the project up front, and then pledged revenues are then collected over the life of the debt service and used to pay back the bonds. If it's a special obligation or TIF with no geo backing, there is no risk to the unified government. We have 4 projects that have an annual appropriation on their debt. And as with an annual appropriation, we also have 13 projects that are backed with general obligation debt. And for these projects, if revenues are not sufficient for the project, then there is risk to the unified government to have to make up those payments. This next slide is the one showing the list of projects and what types of incentives are on each project. Since the incentives can be layered, some projects, as you can see, have multiple incentives tied to them. And Mayor, I believe you were asking about the 2 NRA projects, and they are Northwood and Wyandotte Plaza.
Okay, so I just want to be clear, but anybody can qualify for an NRA for their single family home. And so this is just development projects that have come through our office that, okay, thank you for the clarification.
Right.
Mayor, this is Doug Bach, County Administrator. So within the NRA provision, there's a special projects, and those require special action by the governing body to go through. So they're called out. So those become kind of a special district, and they can go, the time can be extended up to 20 years if we want to on something like that, but it does require special action different from our approved NRA cycle that can go out to homeowners and small businesses.
Thanks for the clarification.
And I'll just point out those 2 projects. The Northwood project has multiple incentives. It not only has the NRA, it also has a CID and a sales tax rebate. And Wyandotte Plaza also has the same, a CID, an NRA, and a sales tax rebate. Next slide. This one shows the new and also inactive projects that we have. The new projects are projects that are at the beginning phases of development. They're included in the report, and we do have information on them, but there's not enough, they're not far along, not along in the project in order to give any type of performance at this time. So those projects are the downtown campus, which is redevelopment of the Reardon Center site, the Menards Epic TIF at 18th and I-35, the Yards 2, which is an apartment project located within the Riverfront redevelopment TIF, and Urban Outfitters, which is the distribution and fulfillment center to be located at 118th and State Avenue. There are 5 inactive projects listed here. The first one, 38th and Leavenworth Road. As you will note, there is a pending termination, and that is on tonight's full commission agenda. This project or TIF district had a project plan that was approved, but there was never any development. Eventually, the land was sold to a new owner who then applied for an NRA and did a development on the property. So we are terminating that TIF so that we can proceed with the NRA on that project. So you'll see that on the commission agenda tonight. The other 4 TIF areas have no project plans approved, although we do have, I believe there's a couple of them, Turner Vista and Bethany, I believe. There is some I believe we are looking at information on some of those areas, but there are no project plans approved. So now I'm going to turn this back over to Elise, and she's going to start talking about some of the projects.
Thank you, Debbie. I keep coughing right before I have to talk. Okay, yes, so this Legends Active Districts is our first project. And we've ordered these kind of in chronological order according to when the project plan was approved. And before I begin, I want to note that we've referenced the page number in the upper right-hand corner so that you can follow along in the report if you wanted to. So, whew. The Legends project actually contains a couple of incentives that are still active. I think there was probably quite a bit more before, but I'm not well versed on those. The TDD is older than the CID. And most everyone's familiar with the Legends, but in case there's anyone listening that isn't, it's an outdoor mall that has a ton of retail and food shops and a movie theater. It's really neat place to go. It's located in the western part of our county near I-435. And it's just a nice shopping center. And so the TDD was implemented back in 2009. And this financed the parking garage. It financed some road improvements to Hutton Road, Stadium Drive, and the Legends parking lot too. And those are financed with special obligation bonds. So those are the bonds that are backed by the revenues from the project area. And revenues are covering debt service. And actually the bonds are structured where each October, any excess revenues are used to further redeem the bonds. Last year, $395,000 of excess revenues were used to redeem bonds ahead of schedule. And this one's set to mature in 2028. For the CID, which is more recent, it started in 2018, and it puts an additional 1% sales tax. It's financing a 650 stall parking garage that's adjacent to the existing one and connected to it. And it's supposed, or it will have a 350 unit luxury apartment complex on top. It also financed some improvements to the Legends outlets, like the video board that's on the smokestack, the shade structures and facade improvements. And there was some repair that was needed to the escalator, and I think it was enclosed. And so that's the West Lawn area, which is the family oriented area over in the Legends area. These are also financed with a separate issue of special obligation bonds that mature in 2040. Those bonds are structured differently than the others. They're structured as term bonds, which means that we don't have a set schedule. As revenues are received, we use them to redeem the bonds. The next slide is for Prescott Plaza, which is near I-70 and 18th Street Expressway. And it redeveloped an old truck stop into a grocery store with some inline retail and some pad sites. There's both a TIF, which pledged incremental property and sales tax, and a TDD, which adds an additional 1% sales tax to the area. The TIF's financed with GO bonds that mature in 2024, and revenues are meeting debt service needs. The TDD was financed with special obligation bonds that paid off 4 years early this year in 2020. So thank you to everyone that shopped and supported our local development. And you can make a note that if you need groceries or want to go out to eat, the sales tax rates in that area dropped by 1%. And your continued support is going to help us pay off the TIF obligations. The next slide is Plaza at the Speedway. So we're switching back to the other end of the county near the Legends. My chair's squeaking a little bit, sorry. This is the redevelopment of a very large area of land that contains a lot of retail, like, well, I've included a lot of the logos at the top, but Walmart, Kohl's, Sam's Club. There's food restaurants such as Olive Garden, Chick-fil-A, Red Lobster, and others. There's also the Homewood Suites Hotel out there. Incremental sales and property tax helped finance this development, and that portion is financed with special obligation bonds, which also use excess revenues to redeem bonds ahead of schedule. This one matures in 2027, and revenues are covering debt service. There's also 3 TDDs here. The whole area basically has a 0.6% extra sales tax on it. But in the areas where TDD number 1 and 2 overlap, it's actually 1%, because one's 0.6 and one's 4. The TDD 1 and 2, the revenues from those businesses go to support special obligation bonds that were used to help finance this. And those use excess revenues each November to redeem bonds. And so far, $1.6 million of excess revenues have been able to be used to redeem bonds ahead of schedule. These bonds were originally scheduled to mature March of 2032. And because those excess revenues were taken from the later, whereas some of the others, the trustee has the option of which maturities to take it from. But this one, they're taken from the end of the issue. This issue has matured to advance the maturity date to September 1 of 2031. And so as we keep getting excess revenues, we expect that to potentially keep advancing and pay off early. The next slide is another success story of local support. This is a grocery store in the middle section of our north section of our county, and its debt has paid off 4 years early also in 2020. So if you need groceries for residents in the area or anyone that frequents the store, it'll be 1% cheaper. And the next project is the 39th and Rainbow development. This is a commercial redevelopment of almost 10 acres near our KU Med Center. The TIF portion, the TIF incentive, is financed with special obligation bonds, which also, since there's a hotel that's part of this development, we've also pledged transient guest tax, 88.5% of transient guest tax revenues. This is divided into a couple of project areas. Project Area 1, which is the north section, was bonded in 2012 and matures in 2027, and it's on schedule. Project Area 2 was bonded in 2013, is then refinanced in 2016 to obtain interest savings. And it's actually in two series. One's a fixed rate and one's a variable rate. The fixed rate matures in 2030 and the variable rate matures in 2026, and both are on schedule. And now I will pass it back to Debbie for a few more projects.
Thanks, Elise. The next project is Shawnee Plaza. This is located at 47th and Shawnee Drive. This is a $4.9 million pay-as-you-go project. It had $1.7 million in public incentives. I will note that on the slide here, the presentation, it shows 7.4 million, but it is actually 4.9 million. And in the economic development report, it does show 4.9 million. So that was a mistake on our presentation. This project does have a 1% CID and a sales tax rebate. Both go through 2025. As I said, it is a PAYGO project, so there were no bonds issued, no obligation from the unified government. All the risk is to the developer. We'll just note that the project, while we are getting revenues on the project, it's not performing compared with the projections when the development was done. And it's the incremental sales that are not performing as projected. The incremental sales are only on the grocery store, and the CID is for all the sales within the district. For instance, I think the cap on the incremental sales was 1.1 million. And I think through December of 2020, we paid very little we distributed very little in incremental sales. However, on the CID, I think it was projected to be at 1.8 million. And currently we've distributed about 1.1 million for the CID. Then the next project is Sporting, and this is the location for this is 110th and State Avenue. It included construction of road improvements to Village West Parkway, France Family Drive, State Avenue, and Prairie Crossing. And it also included construction of a surface parking lot across from the stadium on Kansas Speedway property. Special obligation bonds were issued in 2010 and mature in 2031. These bonds do have an annual appropriation, so the unified government is responsible for debt service payments if the revenues are insufficient. There's a CID, a TDD, and a ticket tax that are used to pay for the ground lease for Kansas Speedway property and also the debt service on the bonds. And if you recall, in January of 2021, the commission approved an increase to the ticket tax from $2.25 to $3.50 because revenues were not covering those expenses. We also refinanced the bonds in the fall of 2020, which generated approximately savings of 1.2 million over the remaining life of the bonds. However, the way it's structured, that savings occurred within the first 2 years. So this is one project where we will be monitoring the revenues over the next several years to ensure that they are covering the expenses.
Debbie, hold a moment. Commissioner Burrows.
Mayor, thank you. And I apologize, Representative Burrows, District 2. My questions went back to the slide dealing with, and I apologize, I made some notes. I need to get back to them if I can. I just had two questions. Well, we didn't get a chance to. I'll go to the 39th and Rainbow slide, the pay-go. When do we get a report? Do we get a report annually about the CID, PA1 to PA2? Will we get those annually to see if that they're performing as they should? That was one of the questions I had. So I'll pause while you provide me an answer for that one.
So the CIDs for both of those are structured as pay-go. When you say report, what are you meaning?
Well, we talked about, I'm just wanting to ensure that they are going to perform, because I don't see any maturity or anything like that. Will they be able to meet their financial criteria, or do they just get the excess dollars through those years? The additional dollars that come in. I'm sorry, I lost my question a little while back when we kept going. And maybe it would have fell right in place.
Well, I think I know what you're saying. So for the CID, we're making those payments as pay-go payments to the developer. And in order to get those payments, the developer has to submit cost certifications, which have to be reviewed and approved to determine that they actually incurred eligible cost from the district. And so we would only pay out cost up to the certified amount. And then I think for CID and TDD, if there were, because they do extend 22 years, if there were excess revenues, I think that we could negotiate if there were extra improvements that need to be done in the area, and anybody can correct me on this, that those, whether or not those revenues could be used, those excess revenues could be used to cover those or not. But yes, we only pay out up to the certified costs.
And this is Doug Bach, County Administrator. I believe also there is a total cap on the maximum amount of CID revenue they can get over the life of the project. This may not have it. I know we've been putting it in most of them recently. And this one obviously goes back 7 or 8 years since we went through this development deal. So maybe there's not a cap on these. Do you see that, Elise, in front of or within the deal points?
I'd have to look. I'd have to read the development agreement for this one.
Yeah. I mean, her answer kind of hit it in the standpoint that it's the amount of money that's generated to it. And we've been working to put, this was probably one of the very first CIDs we did. It may have been the very first CID we did. But the ones we've done for the past 5 or 6 years, I know we've been putting a total cap to the project as to how much somebody could receive in the chance that the project performed way above what was projected.
And Doug, thank you for that explanation. That's exactly what I'm getting to. And I look back at the sporting and know and recognize that we did have to meet some of the financial obligations in reference to I'll call it the parking lot issue. that we had to put dollars into. But if this goes back to the Legends area of the CID, if we put a cap on them, that gives us a number in which to work with. If it's just an open-end contract, that was my concern. If it does perform more so, then I would hope that we would have a way to capture that revenue instead of continuing to let it go out. Thank you. I'm finished.
Okay, the next project is Legends Honda, and this is located on the north side of Parallel between 99th Street and 100 Terrace. It was a $14.7 million project. This project does have a 10-year property tax rebate from the city and county tax through 2026. It also has a 10-year incremental sales tax rebate through 2025. It is a PAYGO project. We did not issue bonds for this project. Originally, a second dealership was contemplated for this development, but was not implemented, partially due to the addition of the auto mall that's in the adjacent Star District. So instead, the land was repurposed and a car wash and overflow lot were added. And there was also land that was sold for the construction of the collision center. The project is meeting projections. Currently, total reimbursement is capped at 2.6 million, and we've distributed 2.1 million so far. Next project is Metropolitan Avenue, and this was a redevelopment at 24th and Metropolitan. There are two developed project areas. Project Area 1 has the Dollar General and grocery store, and Project Area 2 has a Walmart neighborhood market, as well as some undeveloped pad sites. Project Area 1 has a TIF and sales tax rebate. There is a $1.6 million general backed bond, TIF bond issue on the project, and it also has a 1% CID that was issued to pay for project expenses that were not financed with the bonds. The CID expense is expected to be paid by 2025. Project Area 2, TIF has an $8.5 million GEO-backed TIF bond. For both of these, the revenues are exceeding the debt service payments, and we are using that to reduce the liability on the bonds. We do expect that we'll collect enough revenues to pay the debt service probably about 5 years earlier than what was projected. And now I'll turn it back over to Elise.
Thank you. So Wind Up Plaza, which is one of the projects that has NRA as an incentive, it's located at 70th and State Avenue, and it was the demo and reconstruction renovation of the shopping center there. These have special obligation bonds that were issued back in 2012, which had an annual appropriation backing, which the CID, the NRA, and the sales tax rebate, they all are pledged to those bonds. Now, these bonds were refinanced in 2016 to remove the annual appropriation backing once the project had been established. And then also an additional 5 million was added to that for additional improvements. Right now, the bonds are underperforming compared with the revenue study projections, and all three sources are underperforming, but we're not concerned yet because the projections contemplated an early payoff in 2027, and there's an additional 7-year buffer period where the bonds are mature in 2034. And so we still expect them to pay off on time. Moving on to the next project. This is the project that has the CID and TDD assessment. So the additional, the CID assessment is an additional $1.05 per square foot assessment to each building. And the TDD assessment is an additional 15 cents per square foot. And those are charged to each building for 10 years per building. Central Industrial Park, I should tell you what it is. It's the development and construction of approximately 1 million square feet of industrial and manufacturing space. And it's at the former Fairfax plant site. And here also environmental remediation was needed. So that's part of the reason that there's an incentive. 2 buildings have been built totaling almost that 1 million square foot. And the first building, which is the smaller building, it runs through 2024, and the second larger building runs through 2027. So the CID assessment is being distributed as pay-go to the developer as it's received, and then the TDD assessment is being accumulated for improvements in the area. And Northwood Plaza, this is the other one that has the NRA. It's a shopping center at West 47th Avenue and Mission Road, and all the incentives on this are pay as you go. There's an additional 1.1% CID sales tax, the NRA, and then a sales tax rebate as well. That's going to as distributions to the developer for incurred costs. Rainbow Village financed the acquisition and redevelopment of 2 acres on Rainbow Extension and Rainbow Boulevard. The existing structure was demoed, and except for the Applebee's, and the Home 2 Suites Hotel was built adjacent, connecting to the Applebee's restaurant. And here there's an additional 1.25% sales tax in this district. Also, incremental property taxes are pledged for the first 11 years, and then that pledge is reduced to 75% in year 12. And since this development has a hotel, all transient guest taxes were also pledged, and it's 88.55% of the UG portion of the transient guest taxes that are pledged. All these incentives are also pay-go.
Next project is Turner Logistics. This is located at I-70 and Turner Diagonal. It's a $155 million project with a $7.5 million public incentive. It's development of a logistics center, which includes industrial distribution and manufacturing space. The project does include 7 phases and 2.7 million of square feet of improvements. There is a minimum requirement of 1 million square feet of building space, and it's anticipated to bring 2,500 new jobs. Each building has a 10-year tax abatement. However, pilot payments are scheduled to be made once the buildings are completed. It's still in the construction phase, and one of the 7 buildings has been constructed. The next one is the downtown grocery store located at 5th and Minnesota. This is a 14,000 square foot grocery store. The unified government owns the building, but it's under a management agreement with the Merck to operate the store. It's a $7 million project. The pledged revenues include a property tax TIF, sales tax, private placement bond through LISC. All 3 of those are backed with GO bonds. There's new market tax allocations and cash contributed by the unified government. The store did open on July 30th of 2020 during the middle of the pandemic. There was an impact with, people started working remotely versus being at work downtown, but we have seen some improvements and are hopeful that as restrictions are lifted and people start returning to work in the downtown area, that sales will increase. The entire redevelopment district has 4 project areas. The grocery store is in project area 1. The other 3 project areas have no approved project plans at this time. The next one is the Scavuzzo's Foodie Park. This is on the old Indian Springs development site at State Avenue and I-70. It's a $140 million project with $34.7 million in public incentives. There are 4 phases to the project. Construction is scheduled to start in 2021. First phase is a food service center and a solar field. And phase 2 includes some retail and entertainment along State Avenue. Phase 3 is office, hotel, and retail. And then phase 4 is the headquarters office building. Pledge revenues include properties tax TIF, incremental sales tax, and a 1% CID. The project is still in the phase 1, so we really don't have anything to report on the performance at this time. And the next one is the downtown campus, the Lanier project, located between 5th and 6th Streets and State Avenue in Minnesota. It's a $22.7 million project with $8.3 million in public incentives. It includes demolition of the Reardon Center and new construction of a 10,000 square foot commercial space with apartments, a fitness center, and a multi-purpose meeting space. Pledged revenues include 2% CID, 1% incremental sales tax. We have pledged $1 million of transient guest tax funds, as well as UG cash of $1 million, which comes from the Reardon Center Maintenance Fund. And there is also anticipated an IRB for sales tax exemption only. Once again, this project is in the beginning phase, so we don't have anything to report on performance yet.
So similar to the downtown campus, the next few projects are projects that haven't begun. So we're just giving you a brief description, even though you probably know them very well because you've seen multiple presentations on them. But
Elise, I might just jump in. I know this is Doug Bach, County Administrator, and I know we probably, Mayor, are at a point where we have to allow time to roll over for the 7 o'clock meeting. So since the commission has those, and I think what's left here are all brand new projects that have just come before the commission within the last year. I might allow if there's any questions, because I know we need usually about 10 minutes to roll over. So unless you ladies have something else you want to throw out there quick to close up, great job with the report. This is excellent information and well done.
Thank you.
But I would open it up for them if anyone has any questions, and we certainly will follow up if there's other things. Looks like there's a couple.
Thank you, Commissioner Burrows.
Thank you, Mayor. Commissioner Burrows, District at Large 2. You did state, if I heard correctly, on the downtown campus, you only have the CID and the TIF. You don't have the other incentives that have been projected to go to this project listed. We get an updated sheet once the project is breaking ground, or are we just to add these on personally, write them down? Because you have the transient guest tax, but that is a one-time contribution, is my understanding.
That's right. In the report, it details the transient guest, the contribution, and the sales tax exemption IRB, because those are just contributions and there's no sort of revenue recoup on those. We didn't list them in the PowerPoint, but we can. We most certainly can.
I would ask that they be submitted so that we see the amount of investment that the local government has contributed through the policies that we put forward, whether it be a TGT or the sales tax, so we see those figures also.
Sure. Yeah. That's a good point.
Elise, but they are in the full report that we issued to the commission.
Yes.
And maybe you can pull the page number for the commissioner so he can have that. That's
It's page 53. Yeah.
53?
Yes.
And I appreciate that. I'm writing that down, page 53. But if somebody was looking at these slides, they wouldn't see those values in there. So I just wanted to ensure that was concluded. Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate the opportunity to ask a question.
It's a fair point.
Commissioner Philbrook.
Yes, I want to thank you for all the hard work you guys have done to put this together. This is like a yeoman's job. I don't know how you guys did it, but I'm happy to see we have you folks working for us that understand all this and that can present it in a manner in which I can understand it. And people be able to go back and pull this up and look at it and go, oh my gosh, is that where the money went? You know, and how are we getting the money? It is very complicated. And thank you again. This is the second year that you guys have presented this. And this year just tops last year. And I didn't know that you could do that, but you have. And just keep going at this rate. And you might accidentally have us all understanding how all of this stuff works. So thank you for you money crunchers, because I sure couldn't do it. God bless you. Thank you for your hard work.
We appreciate that.
All right, thank you. Well, that does take us up to the limit. We are convened. We'll be back at 7.